Okay, hopefully I'm back. Well, I want to welcome everybody who's watching us online to leave a message while we're doing this. I can't stop and read what's being sent while I'm teaching, but I do like comments. And if you have a comment or you want to give me a thumbs up or subscribe, that would be really cool. So just follow us on YouTube, and I'll try, when I see a comment, I'll be glad to respond to it. Okay, this is chapters 18 and 19 of 1 Samuel, and it has to do with the relationship between Saul and David. So let's just see where we go, and hopefully the internet will stay today. But just if you see a hiccup, that's the internet going out on it. Okay. Chapter 18. When David had filled, Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. That's David. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that he was wearing and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. All right, what does this mean? Well, it's not just a friendly gesture. What he's doing is when he takes his robe, which is a royal robe, and puts it on David and gives it to David, he's actually abdicating his claim to the throne. That he's not going to be the king anymore. But he does not abdicate. 18 right away, you see Jonathan is abdicating his claim to the throne by giving his royal accoutrements to David. All right, now I want you to bear in mind for a minute, okay, as we go through, especially we go through the rest of the stories in 1st and 2nd Samuel. Who is writing it, and who paid the writer to write it? David. Okay, so just bear that in mind. This thing is going to be, what shall I say, a little skewed. All right. Winston Churchill wrote his own history after World War II, and it didn't necessarily comport with the documentation of World War II. So, but watch it when people do an autobiography and stuff. What you can surmise from this is that this is a biography that has been commissioned by David. Okay? All right. David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. As a result, Saul set him over the army, and all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. So everybody is liking David, oddly enough, in David's biography. Okay. Okay. As they were coming home, when David returned from killing the Philistines, the women came out of all the towns of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines and with songs of joy, with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Okay, that might also be translated, Saul has killed many, David has killed multitudes. Okay. And I should mention something about this chapter also, which is kind of interesting. There are two versions of documentation, source documentation, that feed into this. One of them is the Septuagint, the Greek Bible, okay, and the other is the Masoretic text, or it's referred to as MT. The Masoretic text is what we saw in Qumran from the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Masoretic text is much longer than the Septuagint. And understand the Septuagint was taken from documentations that were taken to Egypt as people fled before the Babylonians and the Assyrians, okay? So we've got two different narratives here. The New Revised Standard Version takes most of the information from the Masoretic text which, by the way, is longer than the Septuagint. So there's more material in the Dead Sea Scrolls than there was in the Septuagint Greek. The NIV tends to follow the Septuagint more than the Masoretic text. So if you see differences in between translations, that's probably one of the main reasons why. All right. Saul was very angry for this, saying, displeased him. He said, "They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom?" So Saul eyed David from that day on. All right, I think Saul always kind of had a little bit of suspicion about this David guy. But you see something starting to build in Saul. There's a jealousy building up in Saul. So, how far does this go? The next day, an evil spirit from God, I thought the devil was the one who sent evil spirits. But evidently, there's a bigger job description for God than most people realize. Okay? The next day, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul threw the spear, for he thought, "I will pin David to the wall," but David eluded him twice. You would think after the first spear, he'd have left. This is not the game of darts that you want to be involved with the king.
But did David have a choice? Saul's king.
He is the king, and he was not dismissed.
Right, so he had no choice.
He didn't have a choice. I'm surprised Saul didn't tell him, "Hey, stand still, will you?" This is... Anyway. Okay, Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. This seems like a promotion. You know, he's going from musician to commander of 1,000. And David marched out and came in leading the army. David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in awe of him, but all Israel and Judah loved David, for he who marched out and came in leading them. For it was he that marched out and came in leading them. Okay. So that's... Saul, you got to understand, in terms of leadership, you need to understand that good leadership promotes people that are helping you and are successful in doing it. So, if, for instance, let's just say, they had medals back then. If Saul had awarded David a medal, two things would happen. David would be recognized for his heroic actions. And at the same time, Saul would maintain his authority over David because he would be the one issuing the reward. You see how it works? Okay. If you have somebody who's really outstanding working for you, you don't want to hold that person back. But you do want to have an association that you promoted, allowed, encouraged, that kind of thing, so that you maintain your authority, and you're able to garner an appropriate amount of credit for what that person is doing. Okay? Saul didn't do that. He just got jealous. And that happens. And I know that there are times when people have been held back. People who are very talented are held back by their supervisors because they're jealous of what was going on. I remember when I was contracting with the government to teach technical writing to government employees, and that was like, anyway. One of the big issues that we dealt with in the class was editors. And a person who would draft something would draft it. I mean, if they were very talented and good writer and everything, they would draft everything. And then it would go through 5 editors. And by the time it went through 5 editors, you couldn't recognize it. And it was really not as good. Okay? So what was happening was that the editors tried to interject themselves into the process inappropriately so that they could take credit for a part of that document. That's not the way you do it. Okay? You leave the good stuff good. But in fact, some of the writers would intentionally put in typos and errors and things like that so that they had innocuous stuff that the editors could play with without touching the memo itself. Okay, that happened, by the way, that happened a lot in government writing. A lot. All right. Okay, then Saul said to David, "Here's my elder daughter Merab. I will give her to you as a wife." Well, he was supposed to do that when he killed Goliath. Okay, the promise was that he would get the king's eldest daughter. Okay, "I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." All right, fine. So, well, we'll see what's going on. Okay, for Saul thought, "I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines deal with him." So he's hoping that David is constantly in combat. Maybe somebody will off him. Okay. David said to Saul, "Who am I and who are my kinsfolk, my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" But at the time when Saul's daughter Merab should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel, the Meholathite, as a wife. So Saul went back on his promise. Okay, now, Oriental culture, you're offered a great gift, and you say, "Oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. You shouldn't be so generous. And who am I? I'm just a small guy. My dad's nothing," which he was really something. But he said, "I'm not worthy to be included in your family and all of that." And the king said, "Oh, okay." And gave Merab to somebody else. Okay, which, by the way, becomes a real issue later on when David's king. Okay?
So this daughter that he had given to someone else, I guess that guy died?
No.
He took her back?
Wait till 2 Samuel. It gets really interesting. Okay? All right. Now, Saul's daughter Michal loved David. Now, this is interesting. Okay? This is the only time in the Bible where a woman expresses her love for someone. Okay? It's the only time. Now, marriages were always arranged. It didn't matter if you loved somebody or not. You married somebody and you hope that the love caught up. But she loves David like all the ladies do, because they come out singing about him, right? He's the rock star, okay, and she's the groupie, and she loves David. But this is the only time when it's mentioned that a proposed wife actually loves her husband in advance. Okay. Saul thought, "Let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." So once again, he's trying to lock this guy into a life of combat. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, "You shall now be my son-in-law." Saul commanded his servant. He didn't ask David whether or not he wanted to be. Okay? "Speak to David in private and say, 'See, the king is delighted with you, and all his servants love you. Now then become the king's son-in-law.'" So Saul's servants reported these words to David in private, and David said, "Does it seem a little thing to you? Does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and of no repute?" So we hear this, dissembling again. The servants of Saul said, "This is what David said." Then Saul said, "Thus shall you say to David, the king's desires no marriage present except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies." Okay, this is why, when I set this thing up for YouTube. I said, no, this is not for kids. Okay. These are war trophies. You know, the Native Americans were famous for taking scalps. The Hebrews had an interesting way of selecting their trophies. Anyway, it was a way of demonstrating that you not only defeated your enemy, you emasculated your enemy. Okay? So it was not just a trophy, it was a way to demean your adversary. And it was evidently it was something that the Hebrews had an affinity for. We don't see it. We don't see any of this taking place in Gentile cultures. That's a big deal, but you know, for the Hebrews, it seems to be. Now Saul planned to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. When his servants told David these words, David was well pleased to be the king's son-in-law. Evidently he didn't know, well, okay, he was happy. He's saying that my dad can't give you a royal bride price. Okay, so the king says, well, we'll just write that off and we'll take the foreskins instead. Okay. Before the time had expired, David rose and went along with his men and killed 100 of the Philistines, and David brought the foreskins, which were given in full number, to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Saul gave him his daughter Michal as wife, but when Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that Saul's daughter Michal loved him, Saul was still more afraid of David, so Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. Well, I think he was probably his enemy before that. A couple of spears and a couple of battles, you know, there was some indication. Now, here's the interesting thing. Saul is trying to use the Philistines. He's basically conspiring murder by enemy forces, okay? And what other king did that sort of thing?
David,
David did.
he learned well.
Yeah, he learned well, okay? Except David was more successful at it than Saul.
Yes, he was. Maybe David was smarter than, what was his name? What was Bathsheba's husband's name? It's left me.
Uriah the Hittite.
Uriah, yeah.
Yes, yes, Uriah the Hittite. Okay, his wife was on HittiteHotties.com. Yeah, that's interesting. You try to get somebody else to do your dirty work. Then you can make a monument to him. He could be a hero, you know, but dead. The other thing that you see happening here is Saul is seeing his children. His children are more loyal to David than they are to their dad. So you can see there's kind of a double jealousy going on. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle as often as they came out. David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his fame became very great, especially in his own biography. Okay, the Masoretic text keeps the number at 100. The Septuagint says that Saul wanted 100 foreskins, but David came back with 200 foreskins. Okay, so you see some differences in the translations. Saul spoke to his son Jonathan and with all his servants about killing David, but Saul's son Jonathan took great delight in David. Jonathan told David, "My father Saul is trying to kill you, therefore be on guard. Tomorrow morning stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I will go and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. If you learn anything, I will tell it. If I learn anything, I will tell you." Okay, but supposedly David is hiding in earshot of this conversation. Jonathan spoke well of David to his father, saying to him, "The king should not sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have been of good service to you. For he took his life in his hand when he attacked the Philistine. And the Lord brought about a great victory for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against an innocent person by killing David without cause?" David's not an innocent person. Okay? Let's really put this in context. David and Samuel have already set up a coup against Saul. They are all already in a treasonous plot against Saul. I mean, we look at Saul and we say, what's with this guy? He's angry and, unjustifiably so and all. But David and Samuel have conspired together to take the kingdom away from Saul. They are already guilty of treason. Even if he's great in battle, killing giants, and the ladies love him, I'm sorry, this is treason he's involved with, and Saul knows it.
But didn't God call David? He already said David was going to be king.
So God was involved in the treasonous plot too.
God was just making sure his plan took place.
Which could be treason.
Any way you want to say it, okay.
Okay? So Saul's no dummy. Samuel basically said there's going to be a treasonous plot against you, and God's behind it. And I guess Saul wasn't happy about that.
Well, if you look at it, Jonathan was in cahoots with David because he knew his dad wasn't going to be king anymore, so he wanted to be good friends with David.
Makes sense to me. And I'll tell you what, when you start seeing what goes on when David actually becomes king, and how he has a relationship with Saul's offspring, it gets very complex. And if you were a son or daughter of Saul, your life was always in jeopardy as long as David was king, and especially when David handed it off to Solomon with a hit list. Okay? I mean, this is mob stuff. All right. Okay, Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. So Jonathan called David, at least not by me. Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. So Jonathan called David and related all these things to him. Jonathan then brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. So now he's back in the court with Saul. Okay, again there was war. And David went out to fight the Philistines. He launched a heavy attack on them, so they fled before him. Then an evil spirit of the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand while David was playing music. Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul so that he struck the spear into the wall. David fled and escaped that night. So now David knows that, okay, Saul's word isn't worth anything. You would think Saul was an Iranian.
So again, if David's writing this,
Yeah.
how does David know the evil spirit of the Lord came on Saul? I mean, Saul was just trying to kill him.
Oh, okay. That comes a little bit later. Okay? But spirits do things to people that are weird. Now, what's kind of interesting in this is that you're getting two perspectives on Saul. One is that an evil spirit comes into Saul. Okay? But every action after that, you can see Saul's motives in it. Not the evil spirit's motives. Saul's own jealousies, hatred, fear, awe. Okay, all of that seems to be Saul. You don't see the work of the evil spirit yet. Okay? Saul sent messengers to David's house to keep watch over him, planning to kill him in the morning. David's wife, this is a cool story. David's wife, Michal, told him, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through the window. Okay, this is almost like Jericho, where the spies are getting out the window. Okay, he fled and escaped. Michal took an idol. Where did she get that? In David's house. Okay, took an idol and laid it on the bed. She put a net of goat's hair on its head and covered it with clothes. Okay, I don't know if you've been watching the news lately, but in Bangladesh there was a bull that was supposed to be sacrificed. in a religious ceremony. And the bull is kind of blondish, okay? And it has a shock of hair that looks like Donald Trump's. And the people of Bangladesh said, we can't sacrifice that bull because it looks like Donald Trump. So, so they're putting it in a zoo. But I don't know about the rest of the bull, but the hair really does kind of look like it. Paul sent the messengers to see David for themselves. He said, bring him up to me in the bed that I may kill him. Well, now he's not waiting for the Philistines. When the messengers came in, the idol was in the bed with the cover of goat's hair on his head. Can you believe them bringing this all the way to the chamber without knowing that it was an idol? They must have thought, this is a cool joke. Let's play it on the king. Bad idea. Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped? Michal answered Saul, and this is deceptive. He said to me, let me go, why should I kill you? So she's saying, I let him go because he threatened to kill me. So, you know, she's going to save her own life. Okay, David joined Samuel in Ramah. Now David fled and escaped. He came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. Well, of course David's going to go to Samuel. He's running into problems with the king, right? So who else? He's the guy who anointed me into this thing. Okay. Saul was told, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David. When they saw the company of the prophets in a frenzy, with Samuel standing in charge of them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also fell into a prophetic frenzy. When Saul was told, he sent out other messengers, and they also fell into a frenzy. Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also fell into a frenzy. Then he himself went to Ramah, and he came to the great wall that is in Sikut. He asked, where is Samuel and David? You know he's going to whack them both. And someone said, they are at Naioth in Ramah. He went there toward Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him. This is not the good spirit, this is the evil spirit. Okay? As he was going, he fell into a prophetic frenzy until he came to Naioth in Ramah. Now, what you're seeing is that evil spirits can also get you into a prophetic frenzy. He too stripped off his clothes. I mean, these other guys did the same thing, okay, evidently. He too stripped off his clothes, and he too fell into a frenzy before Samuel. He lay naked all that day and all that night. Therefore it is said, is Saul also among the prophets? And you heard this before. Okay? So, when Samuel anointed Saul, there was a time when he met the prophets of the Lord and he fell into a prophetic frenzy. Okay, if you get into a really bizarre behavior, no matter what it is, if you're acting nutso, there is a spirit of the Lord of some sort, good or bad, that's making you do that. So when you look at the evil spirit, this is a spirit that humiliates Saul. Okay? It's just like, you know, when King George lost the Revolutionary War, for a while he went mad. And this is kind of what you see also with Saul. So anyway, that's chapter 19. Things just don't go well with Saul. Things go worse. You're going to see David as, back then he was considered heroic. We would consider him to be duplicitous and traitorous in many ways. And so as we get into 20 and following, you're going to see how these issues with David transcend the issues that Saul has with the Philistines. So he's no longer defending his people against Philistines. He's trying to off David. That's where he's focusing, and that puts them in a very vulnerable position as opposed to the Philistines during Saul's time. Okay, well, there we are, and hopefully, if the internet holds, I'll see you next week. Leave a comment, or give me a thumbs up or down. Love to respond to you. I'll see you later.